My name is Linda Robertson, and I'm with Recreation and Parks. I think I've seen most of you all here before, so I'm going to keep this chatter to a minimum. This is the fourth and final meeting of our community design outreach process. There will still be community outreach events, so please stay tuned. This is not the end of our outreach by any stretch of the imagination. But I just wanted to quickly go over a couple of the ground rules. Basically, just be respectful of other people that are speaking or have comments. If you disagree with it, that's fine. Just everyone gets to speak their piece. We'll stay on topic just because we have limited time. Tonight's discussion will focus mostly on fiscal issues and financing and phasing. So everybody is familiar with the plan. If you're not familiar with it, please visit the website, which is at San Francisco Parks Alliance website. It will actually prompt you to go to the Parks Trust website, or take you there. It'll have a direct link, but you'll be able to find all the information from all of the previous meetings, as well as our plans. We'll also be posting any comments that you have. If you feel like you haven't had your voice heard and you still want to share some comments about the design or about the process, please feel free to write down an email and send it to me. I have cards that I can provide just to make sure that everyone's voice is heard.
My paper says meeting number 3.
Sorry?
This paper says meeting number 3.
Oh, it's meeting number 4. I promise.
Way to go, Nick. Way to go, Nick.
Mistakes happen. All right, so if we can all just make sure that our cell phones are turned off, we'll start this, and I'll turn it over to Meredith to get rolling.
The gold star.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Meredith Thomas, and I'm the Director of Policy and Stewardship for the newly formed San Francisco Parks Alliance. And I think you've all heard me say this before, that recently, October, the Neighborhood Parks Council and the San Francisco Parks Trust came together to form a larger, more effective park-serving organization that works on policy and advocacy, but also on philanthropy. And so the dust is still settling in our new organization, and we're still working on who we want to be when we grow up. But one of the programs that we know that we will keep and that we run is fiscal sponsorship and working with community park groups and neighbors around improving their parks. And so we're here tonight because we are currently fiscally sponsor the McKinley Square Park Foundation, and we also work with a number of groups citywide, and we're here to kind of support the efforts of you as neighbors in whatever form they take, to phase projects or to try to figure out how to address the needs you would like to see funded in the park because they're currently unfunded. And we also work closely with the Rec and Park Department to kind of reflect back to them what we think we're hearing and just be a part of the partnership that it will take to really transform the park from where it is now to the vision you have for it and that you're building here. So we're here tonight as a partner and to listen and to support ongoing efforts to renovate the park, probably in phases, since there's not a big angel with a big check of money that's just going to do it all at once. Okay? I know. Thank you all. John?
Well, hi again, and it's my fault. It is meeting number 4. And, yeah, so let's find the other mistakes here. But, so first of all, I want to say that I have enjoyed the process of working with you as a community through these 4 meetings, and my feeling is that the amount of input has been great, and the dialogue has been extensive, and we've had a really good share of information, I feel, and then I'm also really happy with how the park evolved with the input. So I feel that if we see this to the end, which I'm sure we will, it would be an incredible contribution to the community. And I think if all of you pick up the baton and can keep it moving, it'll be really amazing. And I think it's come a long way. And I think that there's a consensus concept about what the park could be, and I think that's really exciting. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to quickly just refresh everyone. The first meeting we talked about our community input. was concerns about the park, there was opportunities, people were dreaming, and we then synthesized that into the analysis and issues and opportunities, looking at wind and views and light and what we want to preserve, and then that was interpreted into areas of improvements, and then we identified some major projects, and then we were able to then distill those into essentially 4 zones, and the 4 zones being the, not in any particular order, improving the playground, improving the upper lawn, and making a connection to the lower part of the slope, and then taking what is a really underutilized and part of the property of the park and a designated off-leash area, really taking that to an entirely new level. And so developing an off-leash dog play area that is really usable and a real amenity for the community. And then providing more community interaction in that area. And then really taking advantage of the large amount of land that's on that south-facing slope to improve habitat, native plants, get rid of foxtails, and improve circulation. So all those ideas have been assimilated into this concept plan. And so then today what we're going to do is also refresh or kind of summarize the last meeting, which, if you recall, we talked about we had a survey where each one of those particular 4 zones was identified, some of the elements within it were identified, and then everyone had an opportunity to rank them through a 1 to 5, low priority to high priority, and then make just comments in general, which have been summarized in this handout, which is on the table. And and then at the very end, everyone was given a dot, or 4 dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, red being the first priority, blue being the lowest priority. And then they're able to stick the dot on the drawing to define which zone had the most priority, maybe most benefit, and so then we've also summarized that. So what the handout here takes those numbers of dots and defines them on the first page. There was also a subsequent meeting with the boosters, patriotic boosters, and we, not to diminish the involvement of most of the people here that have attended all 4 meetings now. Your input has been essential and beneficial, but we did ask them to go ahead and throw dots on also, just to get a take from their perspective. And we've separated that as another isolated bar, just kind of to see what that room, the pulse of that room was. And it was actually quite similar. So in the most general review of that, the area of greatest priority turned out to be the off-leash dog play improvement area. So this was the highest priority. Surprising to me, the lower slope.
Can you put that up on the easel right
Sure,
now?
absolutely. The next highest priority was the lower slope, the trails, moving the fence, improving wildlife habitat, creating more native plant species. So this area was the area improving connectivity along Vermont Street. That was the area of next highest priority. The third highest priority, and this is from the community meetings that were specific to the design of the park. And then the next highest priority was the playground. And the fourth is the upper lawn and the connection down to the lower part of the park. The boosters had a similar conclusion, but the playground had a little higher number over that lower slope. But in essence, in either case, clearly the improvements to a flat, usable, dedicated dog play area was, in all cases, the number one priority. We can go through, I'm going to quickly breeze through the survey, and they're not in the order of priority, they're in the order of just purely the way we put up this drawing. So in this case, A happens to be the lowest priority item. But, so when you glean through this, you'll see that some of the highlights are the staircase, it's the staircase linkages, there was comments about preserving the trees, but there's some comments about making the linkage through. There was some other comments, and you can read through these. I'm actually not going to go point by point. I think it's a little. You can read through these. If you have comments, you can write to Linda. You can bring it to us. Also, at the end of the meeting, we're going to have an open discussion. So, take a moment to read through it as I'm talking, and go through it. So, the improved off-leash dog area is. I'm sorry, I missed that. B is the playground. There was talk about the slides. There was some issues about wanting to have the swings and slides outside of the playground area that came up in a number of cases in some of the descriptions. And so that's something that can be considered when you get into detailed development. And the thing to keep in mind is this is a concept plan. It's at the most general. Every single piece would have to then come back to the community for further discussion. So it's representing something, but it may, in the end, it probably wouldn't look exactly the same. And there's considerations for access and budget, other things that are going to come into play. Things like increasing shade, which is like the tree, and providing challenges for children. And these are all included. I think there was, again, I'm not going to go through these in great detail. We can discuss those for you. In the off-leash area, there's sometimes consideration for the drinking fountain and seating a small dog play area. There was consideration for increased vegetation. And I think that was brought up numerous times in the notes about creating planting and how this space interacts with the native plants in the more open part of the southern part of the slope. There's also some concern voiced about the scale of some of the pathways and the materials. And again, all those would have to be developed in greater detail when a project like this was to advance. So I'm going to go ahead and move off that. And maybe for a moment, if you have any particular questions about the survey and issues about the last meeting. If you have any questions, just feel free to jump in at the moment. Then I'll move on to the cost estimates. Yes.
The scores on the far right, is that considered the most important number on page one?
Yes, they're low is 1 and high is 5. Because
some people, they thought like putting all their stickers on one would be the most important thing. And what they end up doing is putting a yellow or blue sticker which is a low priority maybe in an area. If you look, some has, you probably know what this says, some areas have 20 dots and some have 13.
Right.
And so they actually diluted this actual
Yeah.
score.
Yeah, well, that's the reason why we intentionally kept the totals. So you have the ability to interpret it however you like, but it's true that some people put all the dots on one particular one. So I think no matter how you analyze it, you can paint the picture that the off-leash dog play area was the highest interest.
Okay.
And that the improvements to the southern part of the slope and native plants and wildlife habitat improvements were second. Third was the playground, and fourth was the lawn and the connection across. So I think that came out in the numbers, in the way that it was set up. But I do agree that the mathematical equation isn't all that helpful, isn't as helpful because of that. So let's move on to the cost, the project, estimated project costs. So in thinking about how to conceptualize doing this, how do you move forward? I think we all probably are living in reality and realize that someone's not going to walk in the door and just write a check for the whole thing. Or that the mayor's office isn't just going to find the money. Or it seems unlikely that it could be fundraised, the entire project could be fundraised at one time. However, for the sake of conversation, we've considered that to be the first phasing option. The second phasing option is the park has a somewhat of a natural divide. There's the existing Monterey cypress that run across at the edge of the lawn and the pathway, and then it breaks down the slope. So we think that's a pretty logical break. But also when you consider the highest priorities were the off-leash dog area and the lower slope, we can easily say probably one project being in this area could be defined as the first project. And then basically the upper portion of the property in the park is the second project. So we can phase it that way. So that's another way to think about it. And then you get, instead of one enormous bite, you get two less enormous bites. They're still enormous. Another way to think about it is, I was wondering for that one, is to divide the project into a more kind of multiple piece approach. And so the third phasing option is to take the top priority, which is the off-leash dog area, and make that a project. The next highest priority is the lower slope, but we think that that can be divided up into a whole bunch of projects. And that because also we have to think about the skill level and complexity of some of these projects. Clearly, in order to create the flat space with off-leash dog area, we've got to bring some bulldozers in, and we've got to bench the ground, and we've got to bring in fill and engineer the slope. Well, it's not going to be volunteers that are going to do that. It's not going to be the grounds maintenance people. It's not going to be, it's going to be a project. So really it can't really be a volunteer or a community-based or city staff project. It really has to be. Likewise for the playground, likewise for some of the earthwork and endeavors in the upper lawn of the connection. So, but say, pulling foxtails or spreading mulch or even assisting in the development of some of the trails. That is something that probably could be done. And it's also smaller pieces. So if we can define the big chunks as something that is separate, and then all the other pieces we can start looking at as pieces that can happen over time. So then you're might be fundraising for a big piece, but at the same time, lots of other projects can be happening. So that was the way we thought about dividing up the ways of thinking about the project. And now I'm going to scare you with some numbers. And so going back to phasing option 1, which is take this concept plan, and it's the whole thing. The whole thing at one time. And what does that mean? So we start to look at, and I also want to preface it a little bit further. A park project can be built in different ways, depending, in fact, on how the funding source, what the funding source. If the funds are coming from the city, like from a bond measure or from other sources, then it's going to have to be built through entirely the city's process, which is designed by the Bureau of Architecture, managed by the Department of Public Works and Recreation Parks. So that process is one way to go. If some of these chunks or the whole thing was funded by private sources, then you could hire private consultants like myself to do that kind of work, and you can also hire private, some construction management also. And there is some cost benefit to doing that. It's significantly less expensive. However, it's hard to raise private funds, especially at this level. So the assumption in all of these costs is that it's being done essentially in the most expensive way, the most conservative way, which is really through a city-financed process. And and I'll explain a little bit further the differences. But for the sake of making an apples-to-apples comparison, it's all as though it was more or less a city-funded endeavor. So when you take a project like this, and you go, what does it mean to improve this much of a park? Well, you're touching nearly everything in this concept. So it would mean fencing it off, setting up some portable trailers, bringing in temporary utilities, having a little portable work shed, and so that's the mobilization cost. Then you have the demolition. You have to pull out what's there. You've got some of the clay equipment, concrete, some pathways that need to come out, some saw cuts through some of the existing curbs. So that's the demolition cost. We then define in the cost estimate the lower slope area. So here we're talking about moving the chain link fence. It happens to be a Caltrans fence, so the cost in fact would be borne by Caltrans, but there would be associated costs for the project. Then we have some trail improvements. We have walkways that come up along the Vermont side. We have some improvements to the access. Drinking fountains, the off-leash dog play area. Then we have the walkway that comes down to the center of the slope and provides access from top to bottom. We have improvements to the lawn area and the new playground, picnic areas, we have benches, we have some lighting, all those components. But the lower slope, we end up with $332,000 to do that work. We have the off-leash dog run. Now this is a lot of earthwork, and we have some retaining walls. So we're at $600,000 roughly for that work. We have the upper slope connection here, which is the walkway that runs through the slope, $152,000. We have a little over $1 million playground, and the upper lawn area, which would be pathways and some benches and that kind of thing, at $355,000. So it's a $2,658,000 is the construction cost estimate. And then this would, before anything would happen, there would be a survey, there would be a geotechnical investigation, the soils report. There would be environmental review. There would be just all basic assessment of the property. And then you would have civil engineering, design, like landscape architects. You would have playground design consultation, the engineering for the slope, those kind of fees, plus you have all the oversight and review from the different agencies in the city. So that would be ADA, it would be engineering, it would be, we'd also have police, fire, all the agencies would have an opportunity to comment and review the project. It would then go out to a competitive bid for construction. All of that would be administered through the Bureau of Architecture, and then the construction management would be overseen by the Bureau of Architecture as well. It basically adds, in the case of doing the work through the city, it's about 75% increase in the cost of construction. So you take the cost and you multiply it by 75%. If it's done in the private sector is typically around 30%. So there's a dramatic increase in cost when you rent it. Now, you wouldn't be able to get the full 30% benefit of in the private. You still have the oversight component, and you would also have the project review, but it would be somewhat less. So bottom line is we're talking about a $4.6 million complete renovation. Yeah, that's why it's a good thing you're all sitting down.
Yeah.
The other, now, it seems crazy, but, I've done other parks where we start off with like nearly nothing. And in a matter of a few years, it happens. You just have to keep an eye on and stay involved and make your voices heard a little bit. And it's out there, it's possible. You have to be well positioned, people have to write grants well, and you have to go after it. But it's there, it's possible. It's not impossible. I've seen it happen. We did, like Walter Haas Park, we started off with nearly no money, and in 5 years, it was finished. And it was a 4.5-acre park. And so it's not inconceivable. It seems daunting, but it's possible. But when you break it into pieces, and you break it into 2 phasing options, then the pieces start to become a little bit smaller, and the fundraising seems a little more manageable. So here, the project below, we're getting at a $1.75 million for construction and oversight. So it's more palatable. And then the larger, the upper portion, we're at $3 million. So, which actually separating it does increase the price slightly, because you have the mobilization and basically starting, bringing equipment, bringing people, getting the paper trail and everything put together is not much more for a smaller project than it is for a larger. So some of you have some inefficiencies, and so that's reflected in these numbers too. The third phasing option is, and I didn't break these cost estimates are not broken down in as much detail as the first, because in the first phasing option on this cost estimate, it's kind of line item, so you can kind of see how the numbers are totaled up. The numbers are slightly different on like in this phase where the demolition might be 38,000 instead of 100 and some odd thousand, because there just isn't as much to take out. And most of that's relegated to the upper area. So you'll see some differences, but they're not fine-grained, they're not as articulated. So in the third phasing option, again, going back to the priorities that were established, the project one is the off-leash dog area. So if we isolate that, we're talking about $1.2 million to develop that from where it is now to complete. The second project would be the playground, and that's 1.9. And the upper slope area, which is the connecting walkway. and the lawn area. And that includes the things like the kiosk benches, we have these notes, picnic area. We're preserving those trees, we had to take out a few here, we have to add some back. So that's a little over $1 million. And then we get to the last piece, which is community-supported city staff projects. So rather than, so the idea here on the third phasing option, in terms of how to build this out, is we can pursue funds to do a project. Maybe bank some money if there's a lot of interest in the playground or other interests. Some of that can be set aside for those particular ones. But really put all the effort into the first project. Do that project, then put the effort into the next one. And then it's realistic sort of pieces. And then at the same time as that's happening, then there are projects within the park which have identified that could be done that don't have to be undone by any one of these future improvements. And so the list here on page 7 is a list of those projects. And these are more probably things that can be defined in the short term. Every project, aside from picking up litter or raking the sand or sweeping the path or pulling weeds, say, every other improvement that affects the park, that infrastructure, like putting in a stair or making a path, the park is run, it belongs to the city of San Francisco, and it's run by the San Francisco Recreation and Parks Department. It's your park, but they run it. They have a baseline for maintenance. So every improvement does have to be run through them. They are the agency that controls what happens, so it's not mayhem, so that 5 people are building one path one way and 5 are going, it can't happen like that. So there does have to be, they are the organizing body, they are the determiners of what happens out there. So and the city has a lot of liability that they have to protect themselves from. So like access, like disability access, we have to provide for these things. We have to provide for public safety. So when any improvement has to be deemed to satisfy the requirements that are placed on any facility, any home, any park, any building in San Francisco, there's no exception here. So each of these projects, every improvement has to have some level of review approval by Recreation Parks in order for it to proceed. So, and I think this is kind of a more interesting list. And so we have, I'm just going to read each one. I was thinking that we could go through this in more detail. In fact, I think this is probably the more immediate kind of set of projects. And actually, before I do that, is there, maybe I'll get a show of hands. If between phasing option 1, phasing option 2, where the park is split into 2 big projects, so you'd be fundraising for one park and then you'd fundraise for the other, or phasing option number 3, which is 3 basic pieces, myriad small projects. Is there a preference? And so I'm just going to say, so if you have a preference for one of those as an option, raise your hand. Yes?
If you did your phasing of 3 parts, the lower slope being the last.
No. And you mean for option 3, the phasing option 3?
Well, if you went to 1 and then you came back to, say, the second, the lower half down below, the lower, what do you call that section?
The lower slope?
Are we damaging part 1 to get to part 2?
So
What you're
the
asking.
question is, if this was one project,
Well, if the first one is developed, just the dog area,
yeah.
and then you want to, that's finished, all done, you've raised your money, then you go on to the next section. Is there
Which is
damage done to part, Yeah, you had it down as the second.
So in this scenario, so in this scenario, the intent would be that the limit of work for this area would be so that this project would be self-contained. So everything you do here would not.
How do you get to that part? What's your access, equipment, or any work that's being done on that part? You have to put paths and roadways in here without damaging project one area.
Right here, this is your primary access route to this area.
So it's wide enough for a vehicle, that's the question.
Yeah.
Is it possible to then improve that area and you get trucks and equipment back there?
Yes, absolutely.
So you have made that pathway wide enough for a vehicle?
Yes.
So I know that was up for discussion.
Right. Well, okay, so it's true that we did, the concept plan has been vetted by Structural Maintenance Division of San Francisco. So Recreation Parks has a structural maintenance division. The head of structural maintenance has actually sat down with us to go through the concept plan and give us his critique, because they would be involved. Anything that's going to happen, he's going to be involved. So we wanted to get him to understand the project sooner than later and to weigh in. One of the structural maintenance comments is to provide some measure of access into the lower slope. It may not be necessary to take it all the way across, but they would like to get into the site. And so if the numbers of small projects are done down here, it would be done in a way that having access and improved access here is part of the project one, and that you wouldn't be undoing something that you've already done. In fact, it makes sense because of the way you work your way out over time. But the intention isn't to.
It's just that I've seen projects, they go in and pave the street and then they decide they have to do the other.
Yeah, isn't it funny?
And it never fails, so I don't want to create something first and then go in and destroy it and do the next.
Yeah. Well, I think this actually works out pretty well because of exactly that. Things can be happening here if you have access. It doesn't damage the access. Or even if this was completed first, you would still be able to take equipment down through here. It wouldn't cause a problem. So I'm going to just go back to that, a show of hands, if there's a preference for one of those three scenarios. Yes, Jess.
I have a preference for the project one. I'm not sure what you mean by this other area that's not included, but from the ability to get funding from companies, it's very nice to put an option out there in front of them. If they're interested in the children's play area, the tax write-off, like a Zynga, or if they really want to be stellar on the environmental issue, from a funding standpoint, I like that. It gives them the ability to sort of have.
So you're saying that you like when the projects are isolated,
It
so that
makes
you
it
can
easier.
target particular people, even if it all goes in one pot in some way.
Right.
But it's the ability to be able to target.
It makes it easier for them, like whether, like Zynga, they enjoyed our community, now's the time to give back environmentally, or perhaps to the children, or with Success Factors, our other donors. You know, they really like the idea of improving the natural areas. So I think it makes it easy.
I want to hear a little more about why, I think I know the answer to this, but I want to just check with you about why it's only option 3 that has the opportunities to do small projects that have volunteer effort and all that sort of stuff that are broken up, and why it's not included, for instance, in option 2.
Well, the only difference would be in option 2 would be the subdivision of the project number 2,
Right,
and cutting this away.
So is one 4 projects, one's 3 projects, and one's 2? Is that what it is?
Okay, so the first one, phasing option number 1 is 1 project, everything. Phasing option number 2 is 2 projects. Phasing option number 3 is 3 major projects and 15 smaller projects. Now, there's nothing to say that there could be a preference for, say, option 2, but maybe this gets cut away and it's a hybrid. maybe that's what comes out of this conversation. Yes?
Is there an option that like the city would prefer or something? I mean, do they prefer to have it broken out into little bits or one big chunk?
I don't know that I can speak for the entire city bureaucracy, but I'll speak from my own perspective and from my own experience, that there's pros and cons to doing both. And I'm sorry to be so wishy-washy, but one of the cons of breaking it up is that at any given moment, every time there's a new phase being done, there's going to be restricted access or negative impacts to either previously done or existing park amenities. That can be very contentious. In a perfect world, we just bite the bullet, close the entire park, have all the funding, let's get it done. Ta-da, 12 to 18 months later, we have the ribbon cutting and everyone's cheery and happy. I think there's great advantage to having the giant pot of money, but I don't think we have that.
So I'm gonna go ahead and just do that. If you have, even if this is, I do think that seriously, we do want to have a strategy, and we do want to include a strategy in the conclusion of our effort, because the next steps are going to be oriented towards outreach and fundraising, and pursuing possibly a number of smaller and more small bite-sized projects. So do I have a show of hands for preference for a phasing option 1? As a whole thing. Do I have a...
What's that? Even though that's the whole thing, could you break up the funding, into smaller bites for certain companies and companies kind of part, even though you do it all
Sure.
after one?
Well, I think you could pursue option 1, and if it's not going to happen, or there is a particular way it needs to be split up, you can always at a certain point step back and start splitting it up.
Have they done past projects like this elsewhere in the city or within the county?
Myself?
San Francisco?
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
think a good example is like Dolores Park is, I'm assuming, is cut up into projects. I mean, you still have access to the park, but there's a major project going on there. And having access to the park is a big deal for people in the city. So I think it's really important. And having it split off in projects seems to be logical in the sense that people can still access the park where, I'd be bummed out if I couldn't go and bring my dog to the park for a year.
Right. Okay. So is there a preference for option number 2, which is basically conceiving it as 2 pieces? It's a more manageable bite-sized pieces. Okay, we have 1, 2.
I think you have to look at it as, where's the funding?
Yeah.
We can all say, we'd like to do it all in 2 parts, we'd like to do it in 4 parts.
Well, we don't know. So,
Yeah, so how do you vote when you
but,
don't know? There's no
but I
funding.
think what we want to do is establish a framework. And so what I mean by that is, it's one thing if you talk to someone and say, we're looking for X dollars to do this whole thing, and it's really daunting. Or it's another thing to say, we're going to improve this path and this staircase, and we're looking for funding for that. And so there's a difference in the way that you're going to approach.
Well, you still approach it, there are portions of the park that somebody could fund. But for us to say, well, we want to do it in 4 parts or 5 parts now, until we even see some funding happening, I think that's really hard to do.
Yes?
Can a strategy be that we all agree to bank the funds and come together again when we meet certain benchmarks? So when we get to the 500 or 1 million or 2 million, oh boy, what a problem to have. Option 1 or 2, right? Can we just agree to bank the funds, try and get the funding, and then come together as a community?
See how much you can
Excuse me, we have one person talking.
Yeah, kind of, but I think, for instance, why I'm sort of waiting to raise my hand for option 3 I like how explicit option 3 is about all the small projects on the lower slope, and so that would actually argue that, yeah, in terms of bigger money, we would make it, but if there's an opportunity to do some of the small stuff, so we can actually get that lower slope, well, then we should do it. So, and I love that, and I think that's the only plan that actually explicitly recognizes all the volunteer energy about it, because we would be more involved in it too. So, so I think there's opportunities there. So,
I just assumed that we would be doing.
So, let's just see a show of hands for favoring of option 3. Okay. It's pretty clear that there's a sense of, now, a couple other little nuances for this option. When we talked about in the survey what the priorities were, this also dovetails the priorities. So we're also putting an effort into supporting what the community has said is where we want to put the energy in first. So if we never get, if we get a certain distance on this, maybe the thing that ends up not happening is the lawn, or this path or something, but you get the off-leash dog area. When you envision the entire park and you say there's no priority necessarily, you might look through it, but it might be that there's something that you didn't establish as your top priority is going to be the thing that gets funded first. So I think this both recognizes that there's an involved community of people that want to make a difference, and then we're giving an opportunity to make that difference while other efforts are going on. So it recognizes that. It also recognizes there was a set of priorities that were established. And so the project, the way you're framing the projects is recognized. But if for some magical reason more funds become available, well, at that point, this could be expanded to encompass more. So it has the expansion potential, but it also, I think it's more nuanced in terms of reflecting what the community's said so far today. So I'm going to take a moment here to just go down through, because it's really clear what these 3 projects are, I think. It seems to me what's included in these. But what's not so clear is these 15 potential projects and where they stand. So I'm going to just take a minute to go through that, and then we're going to move on to the next agenda. So first is the removal of foxtail. That's pretty much the number one thing that is coming back. And that's a volunteer effort to hand pull, cultivate, mulch, to reduce seed germination. The second is, and that's not really a fundraising thing, that's really an ongoing project. It could be turned into a specific fundraise, into a really concerted effort, or maybe an annual basis type of effort. But the second item is manage existing trees. So it's prune trees to improve health, reduce volume, improve structure, clear away excess debris, prevent surface erosion. And that's something that is ongoing to a certain extent. It could be expanded upon greatly. That would be something that is in part a request. And I think with some of these, Steve, maybe Steve, if you could stand up, and maybe Steve could address where we are with some of these and where the opportunity is. Because these are things that can be done more in the short term.
So, in looking at this list, there's going to be an ongoing collaboration with the community and the city on making some of these come to fruition. Some of the city involvement may seem overly bureaucratic, but it is there for a reason, and it's there to protect the public and to ensure public safety and also ensure long-term sustainability of the site and manageability within the city. So in items like we've had the ongoing volunteer efforts to remove foxtails, to mulch the paths, to do plantings. The plantings, because of potential long-term impacts of plantings, need some degree of municipal oversight, just so that we are ensuring that we're planting appropriate species and not creating bigger problems down the road. The managing the existing trees obviously would involve the Bureau of Urban Forestry within our department. You know, it would be really impossible to control or ensure public safety if the average citizen went up, climbed up a tree with a chainsaw and started cutting away. Now that we want to discourage, you know. So, but there could be volunteer coordination with that, so that, you know, maybe some of the groundwork that happens involves volunteers, keeps the volunteers involved in the process. The southwest fencing, which we've talked about in great detail, possibly relocating this fencing to grab some of the flat land just outside the fencing. At the end of the day, that's largely going to be a Caltrans funded effort, but will also greatly involve Record Park because we're potentially, or for all intents and purposes, expanding parkland. There needs to be an agreement between the city, RPD, and Caltrans to absorb the maintenance load of that.
Hey, Steve,
Yes.
can we go a little faster so we get to the discussion we're running behind?
Oh, sure,
Sorry to
sure, no problem. Okay, reforestation, we talked about that. Vermont Street Path. We need to possibly look into accessibility issues that could arise from opening up new areas of the park that might trigger ADA or accessibility review. Pathway connections, same thing. Native planting we talked about. Irrigation water. So currently we have an irrigation line that basically runs down to about here-ish, as memory serves. It doesn't allow us to water for establishment anything down here. We probably will need to extend that line. That's probably something that Rec and Park can just do. So, you know, that'll become an ongoing discussion with us. Benches, same thing. I think it's something Rec and Park can absorb. Now we can identify areas that we want benches. Signage. Rec and Park is rolling out a brand new sign program. So the delay in adding signage or changing signage should be resolved here shortly. We're looking at a whole major overhaul of our signage system. Lighting is a possibility. Obviously, that would involve some sort of contractor to ensure electrical safety. Handrails on the main park staircase. I have the work order request already in to add handrails. If that's not something that our yard can do, we will be talking very shortly about a small grant or fundraising opportunity to install handrails there. So, you know, some of this is ongoing, some of this is already happening, and we're right in the midst of it. So we're right in great stead. The kiosk at the park entrance, we've talked about having a kiosk up here. Parks Alliance had a program. I don't know if that is still continuing to where we might be able to
We
get a
had a
grant for
community
that.
challenge grant to build a kiosk, and we may be able to do something like that. Community challenge grant and community opportunity fund are sources of funding that are coming up this spring.
And then the drinking fountain install, we would have to coordinate that on some level with greater nuances given where we're ultimately going to go. We might install it, need to deinstall it, and move it, depending on where this happens, but they're all doable, so let's keep moving.
Right there,
Yep.
I'll just keep it. So,
John, I just want to remind you,
so I think if we, since we all, there is a preference for this strategy of direction. This list, this 15-item list, is really important because this is stuff that's actionable now. And if there's things that are missing, let's get it on this list. And I think the next steps, which we'll talk to Ann in a little while, that's what we're going to have to focus on along with the funding. So it's really important to think about these really specifically. So I think we're going to open up to more. I think we want to open up to just more conversation about the park, where we're at, where we want to go. So it's really an open forum of ideas and exchange. And so if anyone has something to say, raise your hand. Yes?
Well, on this list, and you mentioned the community grant period's coming up, I mean, this is things we can apply for this first half of this year. And the award period is at the end of the year?
I think the Community Opportunity Fund will open in March and the awards will be made in July.
So, I mean, if people want to do that, I mean, I'm willing to volunteer to help this 15 things happen, and we can work on that. And we can start that already, even though we don't have the millions of dollars to get this, everything else done, but we can at least start on these 15.
Absolutely.
And I'm willing to work with anybody here on that.
Yeah, so that's great. I think there's a number of organizations that are already established in the community. So I think we have to discuss at the end here how various groups work together, and maybe it's the Park Alliance that becomes the glue, not sure. But these documents are going to be available for the community to help support it. This is a consensus process. We have support of the community. You can point to this process in the applications. It's very useful. It's very, very useful. Yes, anybody else?
It'll be at Rec and Park, or at the Park Alliance, or where?
Both.
Both is good.
Yeah, it's going to be this.
If you signed into the meeting tonight with an email, then we can email out the materials from tonight's meeting and the link to where things are posted.
Missed that. Is that the grant
Yes.
funding, all that fun
No.
stuff that I'm interested in?
Do we have a history of how the other dog parks have received funding in the city? I did not involved with that, or I didn't prioritize it either. I'm curious that there's such a strong following of dog owners. I'm curious as to the dog park about funded and
I can answer that question with one really good example. The Friends of Upper Douglas Dog Park, which is in kind of Upper Noe Valley, came together and put in a Community Opportunity Fund application. That's bond money that's available. Another round will open in March and be due in June, so very similar to the Community Challenge Grant Program. And I think Chris's suggestion is a great one. And there may be, you guys as neighbors come together and decide what Community Challenge Grant might like to fund. They like water, conservation. They have different grant priorities. And Community Opportunity Fund is really wide open. But the Friends of Upper Douglas Dog Park worked with Rec and Park, worked with their version of Steve at their park to come up with a plan. And then the Rec and Park staff person helped attach some numbers to that, give them a budget. And they turned in a Community Opportunity Fund grant and they were awarded. They also do a Dogtoberfest every October. It features costume contests and photos and raffle prizes, and they generated enough ongoing maintenance money to sort of, so when they go and resod the whole place, they can then kind of patch the lawn over the course of the year, and that would be something really great for this dog park to have dedicated maintenance after you get the renovation going. Community Opportunity Fund grants are up to $250,000, so it may not be what you need for a complete renovation. And the list of 15 projects may fall more within that, but coming together as a Friends of group and having a dedicated focus for the dog park is how groups have done that before.
Yeah.
So there's all these organizations or groups that may contribute money. If you get a certain amount sort of contributed and you've sort of got your pathway going, will the city, the city looks favorably on that and goes, hey, look, we've got, additional funds to make this happen, so it's more likely we don't have to spend as much, so maybe this, this project is more likely. So, any of the things that we can do to raise funds that gets the ball rolling and adds funds to a particular pot, the city can also look at it that, hey, our money will go further in this project.
Exactly. Yes, and your supervisor, who you should all be leaning on for support for this project, has an increasingly small opportunity at the budget every year, but it still happens every year with something called an add back, which you may be familiar with. But it's basically, we have the budget battles, things get hammered out, and there's some small amount of money left that can go to add back projects. And Rec and Park is very often a recipient of a little bit of add back money. Even last year with that horrible deficit, I think they were able to do a little bit of work at Camp Mather and other things that can't be funded. So you could work with your supervisor if you were short but not short much. And I don't know what that means, a couple $100,000 or less, you may be able to advocate for some funding. You're not gonna get $4 million, because Tony did a plan.
Yeah, and currently, well, Joyce is really active in community fundraising, and she's really good at writing. I've seen the grant application that Chris put together and the community association. So, there's skill level here, and I think what you have to do is really communicate with each other, exchange numbers, get the email, the contacts through Linda. You can ask Linda who else is working on this, and stay involved, because that's what's going to make the difference. And I mean, they're really, it's achievable. It's possible.
A specific next step, both the Community Challenge Grant Program and the Opportunity Fund will have how to apply workshops coming up this spring. And those will be included in the Parks Alliance e-news. They will be sent out via our database. We will try to make sure that neighborhood organizations across the city connect with you about them. It would be really smart for a working group of neighbors to come together, attend a workshop together, sort of decide what approach you want to take. Because when the city sees that there's collaboration and strong support and people are kind of rowing the same boat, it's really much easier for them to say yes to these things. And then then it feels really good to have some momentum. That you kind of need a tipping point, and those little opportunities can be that point. And then also don't forget Zynga.
Oh, yeah, we will.
I'm not certain of the timing yet, but we might have some time at a boosters meeting, maybe even as soon as the 11th of February, which is February 28th, to talk about some other possible funding sources for part of this too.
So perhaps we could do, I don't mind coming in, maybe doing another little, presentation of the preferred scenario for.
Can you come by and drop off the maps?
Pro bono.
It has to be.
Yeah.
The money was gone.
Okay.
And that's an important point. I mean, the foundation, the McKinley Square Park Foundation, has really enjoyed raising the money to donate towards this process, and I'm extremely impressed with what you've done, John. It was well worth it. The donations that we received, the open donations, were really supportive of just getting us a roadmap, a concept, some group meetings, and consensus, because the city could not afford to do this for us. So we're ahead of the game. This makes it easy for anyone in this room to take this to market. Call your friends, do your networking, whatever. The park now has a really cool set of plans that anyone can pick up and champion from the community. And that would be welcomed, absolutely. So thank you, Steve, everyone for 2 years of staying the course. Great.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I just want to make sure if there are any more questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. So is everyone clear on the process and how things occurred and the design that we have? I think Joyce kind of nailed it with this. The end of this process was intended to get a conceptual plan. How that gets implemented, again, is up to you guys. It's your part. But I think the most important step that we have and what we've achieved through this process is a conceptual plan that the community is behind, and we can take to our commission that can review it. And depending on how we decide to implement it, we'll move from there. We'll have to decide what we're going to ask of our commission, whether it's going to be a gift in place or if it's going to be an approval of the conceptual plan to be implemented at a later date or pending environmental reviews. I think that our next step right now is just to move into fundraising mode and to keep involved in the process, keep in touch with us. Feel free to contact me. I'll leave my cards at the table here. And if you have any questions, contact myself or Meredith and check the website for more information.
Yes.
On your figures here, how are they going to change cost of living laws year to year? I mean, if it's $4.7 million this year, what's it going to be in 5 years?
There isn't any projection on that.
Is it even possible to do that?
Typically, we have a 2% escalation rate with our.
Yeah, well, that's maybe a little light. I think the construction industry tends to be about 5 or 7%, something like that. It's pretty high. Well, we did see some reduction in costs, especially with the bond measures from 2003 and 2006 for the school district. They were able to eke out millions of savings in what was estimated with a better climate of bidding. So it's somewhat fluctuating, but I think as the economy improves, we can bet the costs will rise into probably somewhere around 5%.
And you see, do you know our stuff, that's going to be city, state, and federal?
Well, yeah.
And is the city going to pick up all the stuff that they do? Is that a given, or do we have to pay the city? I mean, if it goes through the architectural, all the permitting fees and surveying, is the city good?
That's the 75%. That's included. It's part of the funding for the project. It has to pay for it. It has to pay for it. Essentially, what has to happen is there has to be enough funding to then staff someone from the city to begin a process of environmental review, to get surveys, to get soil reports, to do all this groundwork.
So for all intents and purposes, the city is acting as a contractor, a paid contractor.
In all projects they are. Because the city actually contracts with itself in a way. So if it has a project that wants to restore a building, it has to establish a budget to cover not just that, but also the staffing to do the administration, to write the specifications, to do the construction observation, to manage the personnel, people involved, to track everything to do with it. So it has to pay for itself, especially with capital improvements. It's not like an ongoing maintenance. It's a capital improvement, so it doesn't have to pay for itself. Just like a private person comes in with a project, they have to pay permit fees and design review fees.
I thought it would be much more, honestly, like looking at this and like, this is doable, we can do this. It's totally doable.
Well, I think, you in your foundation, you've pulled a lot of people together that are uniquely situated to pursue funding. So I think,
They've just been waiting for something like this, and everyone in the community has been waiting for some, individuals can take this to their company and say,
yeah,
want a tax write-off?
yeah. But I think also with the spirit of working together and using the recreation parks and using the Park Alliance along with boosters and the foundation, community association, and other groups, as you can together really do something, and so it's pretty darn exciting.
We're offering naming rights.
No, actually, just so everyone knows, I always tell everyone, no, it's not Zynga Park or whatever, yeah. It's completely anonymous, you get no signage and.
The Zynga slide.
Go back to McKinley.
Nice. It's
Yeah.
a real Zynga?
I just tell them up front, your money's gonna be banked, we'll go back to the community as the money increases. Because at the end of the day, at the end of the day, it's the community's park, so, yeah.
Is there any money raised for this?
Well, right now, we have 30,000. I mean, we've raised 50,000, which is very difficult without something like this. With this, now we can go back to like success factors. They were just purchased by SAP for, I think, $4.6 billion. The on Connecticut Street. He remembers this park, as he said in his opening statement when he gave me the donation, as like, he said that in front of everyone, and I'm like, oh. So he remembers his park from back in the day, and Success Factors, they came to the park, they gave us $10,000, and 300 of them cleaned up the park all day. And they gave us money, so it's, yeah, Lars used to live on Connecticut. So he's very partial to this park. There's a lot of people on the hill that are partial to the park, but we didn't have a plan. So now we can all say, here's the plan, where's your checkbook? You know, and so forth. You know, do a community day, and yeah, you know, so this is, we didn't have this before, so I'm really grateful, John.
Is your organization going to sponsor this, or is it?
Well, we sponsored this leg of it, and so if we can raise funds to gift back to.
Are you going to, I mean, it seems to me that we're at a point in time where we have to really start seriously considering where money's going to come from and timeframes. And I think there needs to be a committee or somebody who can start dealing with this, because
Then start
if
one.
there is,
I mean, we're happy to support. The foundation was simply put in place to get this far, and we're very proud of this effort. Our next step will just be to continue the vision. Raise funding where we can, leave it up to the community to decide how and what they want to do. It was never anything more than that.
And then there can now be multiple efforts to do it.
Absolutely.
Because these things are now managed with the city and the park lines and so on. So
we need to set up, but we need to, I mean, we're at the point when he's made, that we need to have a goal. And I'm not sure I see the goal. I mean, is it $47 million? Which is fine, I mean, apparently, talking to a lot of these people, we can pull that off.
But I think that's part of the phasing too, because you know, how do you, it's the old joke about how do you eat a car, right? Small bites, and you chew a lot, right? So putting it in a smaller project, including all these other opportunities on the lower slope, means that, folks can take on as much or as small as they think they can do.
It's kind of the lower stuff we've been doing for the last 2 years, so a bunch of us have been doing that.
Right.
And spending,
So that becomes phase one all by itself.
to some extent.
Yes.
It's still all trying.
All of it helps. It's just moving
Oh,
the
yeah.
goal.
It makes you feel better.
Yeah, that's great.
I think, I sense, you're kind of discussing a desire for some organization.
Well, I just want to see
To
something.
coordinate the fundraising and kind of get organized,
Yeah.
rather than just everybody kind of go off and do their own thing.
Exactly. And with some numbers and something to see, and a goal, an objective. I mean, it's, if you don't have an objective, it's hard to get anywhere. Isn't that?
This is our objective.
Yes,
This is
yeah.
a community plan.
Right, well,
We
that's
have a
okay.
strategy.
But associated with that objective is a $4.7 million price tag in today's dollars. So our next step is to raise $4.7 million.
Exactly.
And I forgot your name. I think we need I think that's right. We need to have, start putting it together, people who are willing to work on that, and who have the ability to at least do it. I mean, I'm supposing that this is pretty, right on budget. And
It's
plus or
within,
minus 10%,
yes.
something like that.
It's realistic. I mean, the foundation exists, and they
The
exist
boosters are there.
in a
Charlie Hill Parents Association.
yeah, it's great.
This is a neighborhood effort. I agree that there should be one effort, but I hope that we would all remember that as neighbors, we represent the boosters or the foundation or San Bruno Avenue Group or the Charlie Hill Parents Association. This is something we're all going to have to get on board with. So.
It raises a good question because maybe through the Park Alliance, they're just responsible. Because no one's going to have a nonprofit status. The Park Alliance has the nonprofit status. The money goes there and it gets parked there until it can be spent. So I think you have to,
Do you guys have people that do that at your organization?
Yeah, so as
Can you
I,
start, can they deal with you? I mean, can you
so we already are working with one part of your neighborhood group. Joyce's McKinley Square Park Foundation is a fiscally sponsored project of ours, and there are other projects. What I would suggest,
I'm talking more about the SDGs to getting, needing protected.
yes.
Can you guys provide that?
We can help. We support neighborhood-driven projects. And so we really needed to get to a place for this particular park, let me finish please, where there was a plan. And then now that there's a plan, we're actually the ones helping Rec and Park do the workshops on the Community Opportunity Fund and the Community Challenge Grant. So we're more than happy to help be advisors on how those grants get written or which grants you sort of go for when, absolutely. But I think a working group of your neighbors would be a great start. And then if you come to the workshops that we're offering, we can sit down and really talk you through some of the steps. Absolutely.
When was that workshop?
They haven't been planned, but we're planning them right now with Rec and Park for Opportunity Fund, which is bond money, workshops like in March, and Community Challenge Grant Program. Do you know when Lenita's doing hers, Maria? No. But through the e-news, that San Francisco Parks Alliance e-news, we will notice all of those workshops. And Rec and Park will also notice them through their listservs. And so we make sure people who have connections, like you send stuff to Tony, or if you have a list serve that you want us to be noticing, please let us know and we can make sure that we blast that meeting information out. And if you guys came together and we could all sit around the table and kind of talk through the details, we could come up with concrete next steps.
So can you just add us to your email list and?
Yeah, if you guys have signed in, we will. Please put your email.
Just to our neighborhood. Right.
Oh, just give it, and Maria's with the Parks Alliance too. She runs our Park Partner Program. If you tell us what it is, she'll make sure you're signed up. Okay, well, let us know. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can also sign in. You can sign in and add your.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just as long as you're on the list. So again, I just want to thank everyone for all of your exceptional work. Thank you, John, Studio Green, and all the community members that came out and helped develop this plan. It's going to happen. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me.
thank you.
That's a good place to like, tell other people about it.
I know.
Easter change.
I don't know.
It's like the second Sunday.
It's all railing away.
I brought that